Please welcome Erik Wenzel.
Thank you all for coming. So what is the fourth dimension? I'll start with these books. So this is The Fourth Dimension and Non-Euclidean Geometry in Modern Art by Linda Dalrymple Henderson, which I'll pass around if you feel like it. And this other book, so that I'll talk a lot about. This is also the Grid book by Hannah B. Higgins, which I'll also pass around. So that, my interest in the fourth dimension came out of when I started at UIC, I had the intention of doing a doctorate in art history. I had my MFA in studio art from UChicago. I have a fellow alum here in the audience. And had been kind of teaching, doing those other things mentioned in the intro. And also, being the artist in the garret too, as you know, is the case being an adjunct and adjunct teaching and stringing things here together and there, and kind of had the idea of, because I'd always written about art and was interested in the history of it along with making it and looking at it. So the idea was to go to double down on academia and then have the academic doctorate history part to go with the studio part. And so part of that, taking classes again, which was a wonderful thing to do. And so one of these seminars I had was with Professor Hannah B. Higgins at UIC called The Many Marcel Duchamps, and it was kind of looking at Duchamp and all the different, I guess, iterations or, parts of his career and stuff, and looking particularly the part that got me, the early modernism, so like 1900s, he's in Paris, and the milieu of people that maybe now are very separate or not considered together, like Picasso and the Cubists kind of being very different than Duchamp. But of course there's crossovers, like if you're familiar with Nude Descending a Staircase, which is the weird kind of faceted, fractured thing that's right in keeping with Cubism. And then also this interest in experimental mathematics. So that was kind of what was going on in Paris, and there were a lot of artists, architects, different creatives that were interested in these kind of theoretical things. You may be familiar with the book Flatlands. So that was also written, it was written before this time period, but that was another kind of creative writer that was interested in higher dimensions of space and math, and also its possible spiritual, metaphorical connections and stuff like that. So it was in that seminar learning about all these different artists and stuff, and particularly one of the sessions or one of the segments of the class was reading Linda Dalrymple Henderson's writing on that, and then she also wrote on Duchamp's notebooks. And around this time, the early 1900s, like up until the 20s or so, he's taking notes and jotting down stuff about mathematics that he thinks is interesting, and then she'll also point out that sometimes he's getting it wrong, which I definitely don't claim to understand math, and it is sort of the artist way of like, I'm aestheticizing it, or I'm, taking it and jumping from there. So I was going to draw a diagram live to explain it. Get my pen. So, like a point in space, I guess that's 0 dimensions, but a point, it has like a location. So you get the first dimension, which is length, because if you have 2 points, you can draw a line, so that's 1 dimension. And the way the dimensions theoretically go is they're perpendicular to each other. So perpendicular to this, you have that, so now you have 2 dimensions. Or like this sheet of paper, right? Like, it does have a third, we're in the third dimension, so it does have a third dimension, but it's super thin, which Duchamp also got really interested in, and calling it the infra-thin. So I think this painting in the title is you're making eye contact with a 4-dimensional cat through an infra-thin layer. So again, this is like stuff I'm thinking about. I'm not expecting anyone to like see the title and get it, but it's sort of like, I don't know, it's riffing. So yes, this idea of two-dimensional into three-dimensional. So what this also allows, now you have a square.
Square.
A quadrilateral, although it's kind of curved. I'm drawing this upside down on my shirt. But you do make a good point. Something I like is the imperfect grid and the imperfect nature of stuff. So a lot of this does look kind of rough and handmade or like held back a little bit. Something I had an interesting comment when Hannah came to a studio visit with me, and a lot of times, like, I have pieces where they're starting a pattern and it doesn't completely fill it, and she's like, yeah, you know what's going to happen, or you get it. So there's this idea of presenting information, and then the viewer can kind of imagine where it might go, or you can kind of see the projected end to it. So yeah, I have an interest in that. And then, yeah, also the imperfect grid, like that, between my shaky line or quick gesture and what it's sort of referencing or gesturing to. So here's our squarish object. So what's the next is depth. Now you got to draw a lot of lines. So then you have the cube. What I also like about this two-dimensional thing is that it's allowing you to sort of see into space and use your imagination. So like you're looking into the space of this piece of paper and kind of imagining it in this kind of pure abstract math space. So it's really an illusion, right? Like it's this sort of visual lingual thing of seeing marks that represent something or allow you to turn it into an image. But as far as we know, that's like it, right? Like the third dimension. And that's kind of what Flatlands is about. Like how can you imagine a world beyond your own? Like you can't quite figure it out. So what four-dimensional mathematics is like, well, what is perpendicular to this? So that's where you get this, which is a tesseract or a hypercube. And as I'm reading, when I was in the seminar, I'm reading all this thing that keeps saying hypercubes and stuff, and I was like, it's like a cube, but faster. Like, I don't know. But I think they just mean like beyond or like, more cube than cube. And I'll also pass this around for you to contemplate. But the idea is that, again, in our three-dimensional space is what a cube that perpendicular, if there's another dimension that we can't experience in it. I've also heard it described as like it pops out. So there's like a video on YouTube where there's like a mathematician explaining and he's folding things and he's like, so you try to make these match and then pow, it makes it two-dimension, and you this way, and then it pops into the third dimension. So that's kind of what that might be doing. I don't know if it's really necessary to show the animation, but I thought about it. Because it just looks cool. The other thing that's cool about computers that didn't exist at the time is they can make the calculations of higher dimensional objects and represent them to us or display them. So a hypercube can exist in like computer space. And again, this is, again, even though it's animated, we're looking at a flat two-dimensional screen, right? We're seeing a picture, but we're able to think of it floating in abstract space, but we're also like imagining somehow, how do we think of this as even beyond that? And so I got in this seminar, I got into trying to draw it, and particularly the idea of like things punching out or popping out in different angles, or like how do you draw a cube that's perpendicular to another cube? And what does that mean? Who do you think you do it? No, it's just like a stack of cubes. It's a grid. But it's exciting, to me anyway, to try to draw these things. And it helped thinking through, because Henderson understands math and is describing it, but reading language, having not continued into calculus and all the other things, it's hard. So that's, I was doing some Wikipedia level, like, what is a hypercube? And then seeing the thing passing around in the animations and stuff, and then we're just talking in the seminar and discussing history or whatever, and I'm doodling, thinking about cubism and futurism. And that's kind of reignited this interest in drawing and stuff. My background's painting and drawing, and I'd done that for a long time. And then in grad school, I'd always had this interest in conceptual art and immaterial art, found objects and things like that. So I kind of used that as to go away from the more personal narrative, the more visually expressive, and thinking about aesthetics in a different way. I was really into the idea of finding painting situations out there in the world, painting situations. So, first like making monochrome paintings that would then be like installed out in public and stuff, and then like what can you find that aesthetic or that taste just kind of out there. But for me, that's also kind of like a diminishing return. What was the phrase? I think it wasn't in my critique, but was thrown out. There was infinite regression, which maybe is that probably Kant or Hegel, maybe. I don't know. There's a lot of that at University of Chicago. It does feel, the more you reduce art and what you're doing, the less there is to have. And so I was missing that visual experience. I like drawing, I like making things, but if you sort of subscribe to the idea of like what is historically necessary, is painting no longer necessary, or everything's been said with it, then what do you do? How do you like still enjoy making art, but like do it the right way, or like I said, the historically necessary way? But now I was going to be a historian, so I didn't have to worry about like making the right kind of art, or like having some sort of career narrative in what kind of work you make, and does is it sufficiently in a different direction but not too far away? So I could just draw in my seminars and use those sketches to help think through these ideas, and that's really where this excitement about making again came from, and of course cats, because that's like a fun thing to draw too. I did want to touch, this is why it is good to have notes. So the screen idea that's in Higgins' book, the grid book, talks about the grid starting, and it kind of came out of like a discussion of like, well, the grid is essentially modern, and this kind of assumption, like Mies van der Rohe, of course, we're in the city of the international architecture style, and like that is modernism, that the grid is this newfangled invention. And she was thinking about like looking outside of disciplines of like art history, contemporary art history. There's examples everywhere going back to mud bricks in like Mesopotamia, and that's where she starts. So she kind of identifies these locations in time and history where actually the grid has been a thing for a long time. It's our assumption that, the European cities are all willy-nilly, none of the streets match and stuff, and so like grids didn't happen until the modern era. But there's actually like long history of it, and it is a history of modernism, but it's also a history of a lot of human civilization, and it's not strictly Western and stuff like that. So very fascinating idea, but that's another thing like artists are into, grids and cubes. So she identifies it in different ways, and one of the chapters is called The Screen, and talking about, of course, like the screen I was showing the hypercube on, or that kind of thing, but the screen of the picture plane. So that's something you might hear a lot if you read art history or criticism, is like the picture plane. So that's like the mirror, right? so a mirror is a good example too. When you look at yourself in the mirror, you're looking into a thing, and this is me. I am looking at myself. I'm looking into the space of the room behind me. It's abstracted because it's reversed, but you're also staring at a flat piece of glass with silver behind it, and you're able to perform this kind of mental operation where you're able to hold all these different ideas at once, and that's much how a painting, in our case, painting or drawing, operates. Something that I haven't tried, but I know, and I don't remember the historian. This is another. You think you know a lot about art history, and then you go back, and then there's not only new stuff, but stuff that wasn't covered that other people did know about. So, one, I don't know if it was Erwin Panofsky, but he writes on perspective, and they're saying, the next time you come out of a shower and you're looking at yourself, before you wipe off the mist, trace your silhouette and realize that it is perspective. So it's also like you think you're you and you're this size and it matches, and you touch yourself and I'm here and I start here and everything. And you look at how small the image actually is because of the distance between you and the surface, that you do that and you're like, your head's that big. And it's like a thing that we're so ingrained in, or we've so internalized and whatever, taken to heart. We understand it so well we don't think twice that this is a reflection, or that it actually is a representation of yourself. So another cool learning screen. But another phrase she uses is the perspective box. So what does that mean? Time for another drawing. It's also interesting I think we've all had like 1 point perspective in art class, whether or not you're an artist, but in high school or junior high or whatever. And so I know it from the making side, and it's really interesting and weird to encounter it from the historian side or from the academic side, where it's like written out and they're talking about transversals and whatever. And I'm like, you mean the lines that like go to the vanishing point, or the ones that are whatever? So again, a grid. So we have like our horizontal line, the horizon, and then you put your point. Let's draw a square so we know a square. So just like I did with the points there, but how do we make it look like it's receding in space? So you have all these connect to the vanishing point. And then, so you have these ones that are all dependent on this, and then you have the horizontal and vertical lines that are aligned with the picture plane or the screen, as Higgins describes it. So this invisible window that you're looking into. So then you got that, and then you have a box in perspective. And, like it particularly comes with the Renaissance and this integration of mathematics and physics and everything, and religion, Christianity. And again, that's a thing that really interests me, this like kind of space between, or this thing where the 2D becomes the 3D, or you're looking into a thing and it's abstract, it's not quite. And that's something that to me is unique about drawing and painting, or at least like the most interesting place to discover and play around with those things. Like, it looks like a thing, it's not a thing. It looks enough like a cat, but it also looks like shapes. It has space, but it doesn't, because it's the surface of a painting. And so again, like the imperfect grid, the idea of like the imperfect representation, or something that's not completely abstract or completely representational, interests me. This also goes into what the critic Clement Greenberg talked about, where like the minute you make a mark on a sheet, you've created space. So, right now you have a figure and you have a ground. So even though it's just a line, I guess we also have a landscape because I'm holding it horizontally. But now you have space. You have like this white space. What is it? Super flat? Is it just up against the surface of the paper, the picture plane, or is it infinite, like the hypercube, where it's just that could recede infinitely? And for him, that's a problem, because his kind of modernist project was like, what are inherent to a medium, and then everything else should not be in that medium. Like, so what is, like, a painting needs to proclaim its paintingness, and what are its inherent qualities that only paintings have. So it's like color and things like that. But he started thinking, well, line, I don't know, because then you have figure and ground, and now it's an illusion. It's a spatial illusion, and that's like wrong. And again, I like that imperfection. I like the problem of it. Because I guess trying to get to the one end, that's where you end up with me not making any art and just like thinking about ideas of paintings out, finding a painting out in nature. And that's not satisfying because all this history and theory aside, it's like, I need to make things, I need to draw, I got to do it. And that human condition doesn't care if it's historically necessary or not, or if it's retrograde or it's whatever. It's like, you have to do what you have to do. You have to do what feels good. So I started drawing and to play with the understanding of these ideas. Talk about the break from making art and being depressed, the academic routine, and this allowing me to just draw for myself again, and then vibing with the spiritual stuff in 4D theory. Oh yeah. So again, like, I'm not super into math, and so it is weird when it's like these mathematic ideas, like I don't know, I'm into that historical moment of it, and I'm also into what people create as a jumping off point from that, and how it has this kind of spiritual connection for people. So I do want to pull up some quotes from my research, which I hope I don't have to abandon because it takes too long to find. So one of the people mentioned is Claude Bragdon, who's how did I describe him? Well, he was an architect, theosophist, or an occult theosophist. So his theosophical, which is also, I'm like, I kind of know about theosophy, but I haven't spent that much time. So in the same way that I'm interested in math, I'm interested in spirituality, and I'm also like not necessarily a practitioner of it, but admirer or a poser. So his book, Projective Ornament, has a quote where he says, "One term corresponds to fate, destiny, and the other to free will, forever forced to adjust itself to destiny. Fate decrees, thus far shalt thou go and no further, but free will whispers, within these limits thou art free." So again, it's that tension or like problem of, is fate, is it predetermination, or do we have free will? And so he's tying that, I think he and other thinkers and people at the time are like, yeah, what is free will? And age-old fun philosophical questions. And I like that spiritual aspect, of like, what, do you have free will, or are things predetermined? Is there a greater plan out there for you, or, and how do you give yourself over to things you can't control? And I think that's what's also interesting about 4D and the hypercube and stuff is like, on the one hand, it's sort of completely irrational and it seems insane. And it's a good model, I think, for madness or like for the opposite of reason. But it also can be, there's things out there working that we don't understand. And so there might be an order or an understanding to it, but you also just have to like trust the process or something, or say, I can't control this, so it's why worry. He has another, So my other kind of research interest was madness, and they seem to go hand in hand to me. Because I have a research interest in, as I mentioned, depression. I have, my own mental history, and I'm also interested in things like the term outsider art, the art of the insane, the non-practiced, non-traditionally taught artists. But that also comes out of my experience of having gone to art therapy. I think when I was in high school, my psychiatrist recommended he might do well with art therapy. And I know there's some history in the practice that it's like people that have trouble expressing themselves, or like children that might not have the maturity or the language to talk about feelings and stuff. But it also helped me immensely, and it's also like kind of where I first learned to talk about art and conceive of myself as an artist. Like, you're taking high school art classes, and that's one way, but this to like really like, what did you make here? Why do you make this? You're gonna make a thing and then talk about how you feel. And there's a lot of intuition and, again, that free will or destiny, like learning to kind of, ride the bicycle but not hold too tight on the handlebars. And that's another thing that's kind of returned to me after this period of making other kinds of art and sort of this kind of, I don't know, withdraw or hiatus that came roaring back in my sketchbooks and during the pandemic, where it came back in, just intuitively making things, and then kind of realizing this is really what I do more than anything else. I like to write about art, I like history, but like this is like the thing I really have to do, or the thing that's the most important to me. So that interest. So I'm bringing in my interest of mental illness and madness, and then also like I find that fascinating. And there's a Michel Foucault quote about like reason and madness, or reason and unreason, and that psychiatry is like the monologue of reason about madness. And he had, his first book is Madness and Civilization, and that kind of led to his further interest in prisons and power and stuff like that. But again, kind of like the Grid book, like how did things that now we call madness or mental illness, where did they exist in the early modern era and things like that? And through reading this and the Linda Dalrymple Henderson, and then sort of as a joke being like, oh, there's this movie that I keep seeing advertised to me on Amazon or whatever called Cube 2 Hypercube. And I'm Hypercube, oh, it's a cube that's fat. It's all around my head. And I watched the movie, and it actually is about a hypercube. So these are kind of a B horror thriller movie series. The first one's just called Cube. And it's like a Rubik's Cube, so it's mechanical, it's three-dimensional. In it, they realize the cubes are arranged by Cartesian coordinates, which is the mathematical analog of Descartes' I think, therefore I am. So he came up with Cartesian coordinates that, like are the X, Y, Z in a grid. And I thought that was interesting too, right? So one is like, I'm gonna map space in this really ordered Enlightenment style, where we can assign a spatial address to everything in space. And then I'm gonna do that with the mind. And so I was kind of conceiving of that, taking the Grid and Foucault and everything, that like, perhaps reason or psychiatry or whatever is like imposing the grid on the mind, which is the organic thing, the not thing. And so in some ways it helps you know where you are, it helps give you guidance, but it can also be a trap or something. So in the second film, they're in a hypercube, which means none of the things about Cartesianism make any sense. You can't figure out where you are in space because it's following a logic that you're incapable of understanding. But it's also like you're like imprisoned within this thing that's going to crush you or destroy you. And again, I thought that was like an interesting model for madness or for unreason, for again this tension between kind of two seemingly opposites. Lastly, I found this, so in doing some research. That was great. I was doing some research. So I ended up not getting the doctorate because the pandemic and other things happened. But I decided to complete with a master's in art history and decided to go. I had the option of doing 2 qualifying papers rather than writing a single thesis. And I was like, this is great. So I can write about madness in hypercubes, and then I can write about outsider art and the history of that of psychiatry and art in that way. So I can kind of take these two ideas and not try to force them together, but kind of have them go across. And also because the kind of beginning of what has now been called outsider art, that the first person to take that seriously was a psychiatrist working in this same time period of like the early modern avant-garde. So he was a historian that became a psychiatrist and like recognized the importance of this work. And so in writing about all this, there's a documentary called Asylum that's about the, I guess largely forgotten now, but pop psychiatrist R.D. Laing. It was a big deal in the past. And you know, like Freud and anyone else made some important points and moves in the psychiatry movement, but then also was kind of problematic on his own and had his own shortcomings and things like that. But one of the big things he was a proponent of was like the mentally ill not being housed and hospitalized and like locked away, but that they have that unique shared experience and they can actually help each other, and that having community. And so he had these houses, like basically what we call it group homes now, but where they can help each other. And you might have a schizophrenic who's in recovery or is stabilized, helping someone who's recently experiencing that, and kind of can bring a shared experience to it that a psychiatrist or a therapist couldn't. And so there's a film kind of about one of these living situations, and there's this one character in general, I guess he's a person too, but he was a computer scientist who had schizophrenia and jots down really brilliant kind of poetic things. And one of the things, when they're kind of panning on his living space and his notes and his poems that he's written on the walls and stuff, it just says, "I think that I am." And it's funny, but it's also like, yeah, how does Descartes work if your mechanism for saying, "I think, therefore I am," or like, you know, my understanding of him reaching that point was like, he was so full of doubt and uncertainty. He was like, I don't even know if I exist. Am I just, you know, am I the dream of the dreamer? You know, like that kind of thing, but like really getting in this sort of crisis of like, I don't even know. And then he's like, oh, but I can think. And the fact that I'm asking these questions, I know that I must exist in some way. But so that's what reason would say. And then unreason would reply, I think I am. So that's all I've got. I think that might be a good place to stop. Yeah, open up if anyone has any questions about anything. Thank you. Yeah, so. Yeah, I didn't have any plans.
Yeah, no, but I have a question. I mean, this is a great talk, a lot of things. Curious about the cats.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, that was on my note.
Yeah.
So what are cats?
No, but like, I know that you've talked about, and also experience, I know you, I live with you, so I know that you have migraines.
Yo.
And I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit more about like color and auras and maybe like the little more woo-woo side of these TESSERCATS.
The woo-woo.
I mean, yeah, just to them as little, the cats role playing.
Yes. So, actually that's something so when you get migraines, some people experience auras, which actually can look quite a lot like this. They, at least for me, they look like reality has broken or something. Like there's cracks and they shimmer and they're triangular and colorful and stuff like that. And that's something I should look more into, because there's like a spiritist or something named Edgar Casey and part of his big thing is that he'd see auras around people, and like that was part of his psychic powers, that I'm like, I think he had migraines when you kind of, and there would be always like, after he had a vision, he would have his sort of oracle speech, and then he would be like bedridden for days and have terrible headaches. I'm like, I think, it's what migraines do. But yeah, so I did put that. So what are cats? And I didn't get to that part. I love cats. But yeah, so I've developed this kind of they're kind of an imaginary friend in some ways. So in that same studio visit I mentioned with Hannah, where she pointed out like where you can kind of see the beginnings of patterns or the suggestions of things, and they don't necessarily need to be completely filled in or whatever. She's also like, are these friends? So she was kind of curious, and you know, I wish I'd like just recorded that conversation because it was great. Like wanted to kind of find out more, like how do you feel about the cat? Is it you? What is the relationship? And I think the idea of calling them friends, it is, you know, there's a love of it, but it's this, like I was saying with the mirror or something, where it's like, it's you, it's not you, it's a representation, it's a multitude or multiplicity. So there's always this kind of cat that's like your cat character, but each time it's different. So it's like a different cat comes out. So like, yeah, the kind of fun mythos or way of thinking it might be that there are these, you know, it's this cat that lives in the fourth dimension, or these cats that live in the fourth dimension, and you're making art and that's your kind of spiritually communing or something like that. And it's also that free will or destiny, where it's like, here's the cat coming, and I kind of have to like let the painting do what it wants to. And I remember you hear that all the time when artists are interviewed or give talks and stuff. They're like, what did the painting want? Or you have to let it tell you. And it sounds kind of crazy, but really when you're in the zone, I hate the term flow state, but when you're in one of those, like it is where you're kind of like, what does this painting do? Or you almost talk to yourself like you're drawing with a kid or something, and you say like, well, what if we try this? Or what would it look like, you know, if we did that? And it is like, again, where I was saying like, I'm a fan of spirituality, but I don't necessarily am one. Where I'm like, I don't think I believe it, but it is, I mean, it works as like an idea where, yeah, it's like, kind of lost my train of thought, but like you are, yeah, I don't know, like you're letting it do what it wants. You're having a moment, and it can be kind of magical or strange, because you know we're used to like you're doing it, this is the action, and when you're letting things kind of happen and working more intuitively, yeah, when you are saying like, what happens if we do this, or like, oh, maybe it should do that, it really does, yeah, it does seem like it has a mind of its own, or like you think you want this color this way, you want it shaded that way, and the materials like won't do it, or they don't want to, and it really does seem like, okay, well, am I fighting this or whatever?
Like you have to be with a cat, like sometimes they want to do their own thing, they don't want to be petted out, they don't want to,
or they say it's time, I want attention now. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Just a question about sort of your commitment to this form, right? Mm-hmm. So you see years of coming back to this same idea. Is this something that just I need to do this, or is this something like I need to be a good soldier and come back and create this project?
I think it's the first one, actually, and like one of the first times I've been able to do that, because most of the time it does feel like I have to be a good soldier and make this body work. Mm-hmm. And yeah, sometimes it's just like I can't do it that way. I can't. That's what I was thinking about too, is like, as my list implied, I've been in a lot of school. And I was like, I think someone's trying to get in. So you kind of want to do what's right. You want to follow what your professors would want you to do, that kind of thing. And yeah, you're sort of, and I think it's important, like sometimes you're taught to be counterintuitive or to challenge yourself, or like, this is what you want to do it this way, but you should be open to other ways. And it's, well, you are in art school, and like that's kind of part of it, is you need to be pushed a little. But at like what point do you start trusting yourself? And for me, that was quite long after. Took quite a while to say why I'm an expert now. I think I've earned the right, and at least for me, there was a lot of like being pushed to like, why does it have to be this way? And how I was saying, like, the taste or the aesthetics out there in the world, and then like, why is it that way? How can you define your taste? How can you defend it in terms of Kant? And it's like, can't, nor do I wish to, but I guess I don't have that. I can't. I don't have the choice. And so I would say, like, like, I like painting. Maybe there's a boundary, or that's the arena. I say I'm going to experiment with everything, but within this. Mm-hmm. And it's like, that's not good enough. Or, it's like you have to completely destroy any boundary or any sort of given, and then come up with new ones, but also in a way that's like unassailable, which is like trying to get out of a hypercube. Like, you know what I mean? It's not possible. But I think, I don't know, just that like constant judgment, nitpicking, and, why is it this way? It's like, because it's that way. Like, you can really internalize that, especially I could, with whatever, neuroses I'm bringing to it. You just learn harder in grad school. And so now there's some comfort in saying like, well, I like this size that I discovered, because there's like, well, it really was like, I saw a pack of panels at Blick, and I was like, cool. And then I just started like sort of painting them just to like enjoy moving paint and color around, and that's kind of how a lot of them became backgrounds, or the starting point. And then it's like, it's okay to have a format, because like you're saying, being a good soldier, so much of it is like, it's not okay to have a format. Oh, you've arrived at a format. Why have you? You didn't think of this reason why it should be this way. And so I think in a strange way, having like, well, I like this size, I like these proportions. And it is, I can go into more why I like them, but like, I like it. And I like the givens, and that to follow up on the like, within these boundaries and thou art free, it's like, it is that, because it's like, here are the destiny or the fate, and then, but look at all the stuff you can do inside these parameters. And maybe it's okay to have some boundaries of what you're doing.
Great answer. Thanks. And I just think the way just your talk and I can see like the juxtaposition of sort of the feelings, the like the mental health dealings, and then just the look into geometry, that all kind of comes together. So it's just I think your talk really informed me a great deal about these. Thanks.
Cool, thank you. Any other burning questions? Yeah.
Great talk. I'm just curious about like your process. Like just being dedicated to like a large body of work. Like, did you have to ever tell yourself, like you just mentioned, like kind of like being like a good soldier, but like, did you have to tell yourself to like sit down and, like paint every day, or like, were you more like, gentle with yourself about it?
I try to be gentle, because you're I haven't gotten over to the studio this week, and I need to do this, and then you're like, am I even justifying having a studio or a practice if I'm thinking about going there all week, and then it's Saturday afternoon and I want to like hang out, or like, I'm gonna go real hard, I'm gonna go to 3 days of the studio this weekend, and then there's only 2 days, and then maybe you go to one, and Yeah, I think it's a similar allowing intuition, or the like, well, let's see what happens. So, I mean, some of it is like, I mean, you know, I have kind of a joke where it's like, well, how'd the studio go? And I'm like, oh, the cats weren't showing up today, or they weren't talking to me, or whatever. And that really can be a case where you're like, I really want to make something right now, and it's just like not happening. And it's like, well, maybe just draw on your sketchbook a little, or let's set this painting to the side and take one of these blank panels and just put some color on it. But yeah, it's never
something else. Like
yeah.
But you did do something else. And that actually helped.
Yeah, and it's something Hannah told me that I think about a lot. And it was more, you know, when I was in the doctorate, but whatever, she says, it's your project. So whatever your project is, whatever the thing you're making, she's like, try to touch it at least once a day. Whether that's actually sitting down and writing a paragraph or a page, or like getting a painting done in one shot, or like finishing one, or it can be like you just look at your stuff and think about it. You know, so the idea of like you're just touching it. So sometimes you're like picking up and really going through it, and sometimes you're just like you're still there, you know, and you're just kind of like patting your sleeping cat on the butt and being like, okay, good to, you know. So like I think that's a good thing too, where so you're keeping it present, but you're not necessarily, you know, you're not whatever, you're letting it be. I think that's good advice that I try to have. And I mean, you're not going to necessarily do it every day, but to like have some kind of contact with it and let it be, because it's not always going to be a chorus of cats singing to you and you're going to be in glory. You know, it's going to be frustrating and it's going to be hard. You're going to get stuck, but the more you do it, you know? So like, yeah, I definitely didn't, I didn't make these with the plan of making a show. I was like, I just need to make these. And I'm like, I just want to like start making stuff again. And it kind of turned into a thing. And then I was like, oh, I like this format. That's a good strategy to have, you know? And then really trying not to worry about stuff I want to worry about. Where like, oh, now I've been out of the game so long. I gotta get people interested. How do I get them over to look at my studio and stuff? And just being like, I don't know if I even feel ready for that. So like, letting it be, and then it just kind of happens. And it's really hard with art because you're also supposed to be really a perfectionist there. And like, maybe when you talk to your therapist or whatever, it's like, well, how can you let stuff be and things like that. But it's like everyone would agree that if it's your art, you gotta worry about every aspect of it. And so it is a real challenge to be like, let's let this, you know, like I'll have, you know, you have your hands on the handlebar in case there's a thing in the road, and then you can grip it, but like kind of just let it go. So that's kind of, yeah, that was kind of how, that was my process. Yeah.
That's a really awesome answer.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, any other thoughts or questions? Sure.
I apologize
Yeah.
for us being late and missing the talk. You didn't mention this, but what is your take as an artist on AI?
Oh boy. No, that is a good question. That has not.
Have you addressed that, or if that's out of?
Oh no, that's a legit question.
Out of bounds, then just say so.
Well, I guess in terms of digital, that's actually another thing that's important to me about these being paintings. Like, and I was saying, like, for whatever reason aside that the rules are, you know, painting doesn't happen anymore, whatever, like, I need to make stuff. And like, so that was part of it too, is like, I mean, I have an iPad and an Apple Pencil and stuff, and I've made things that way, but like, there's something about the ink and the page and the color and the material, and like, I really love doing that. And I've tried to like let go of that anxiety of like, you need to stay with the times, or like, do you want to be some old fart or whatever. And it's like, I don't know, it's important to have the thing, to me, that it exists in space, that it's two-dimensional image in three-dimensional space, and it's made that way because and it, to me, that's like also where the meditative and the spiritual and the therapeutic come in, is that it is a break from those things. So as far as AI, I mean, I'm not super into it for a lot of reasons, but I guess that's my thought on technology anyway, is that I like making it this way. So, I mean, I do have, I guess I would say it's out of bounds in terms of like, I have a lot of thoughts on it, but in terms of the making of this work, the thought is that I've sort of bracketed it elsewhere, and it's not, that I sort of, I draw it needs to be like a corporeal, analog, physical, not digital. Which I also realize is weird because I'm really into electronic music, and it's like, to me it makes perfect sense, but like, I don't know, I've thought about that where I'm like, oh my God, am I just like the abstract expressionist where everyone's, they're so fucking into jazz, and it's like, all these abstract paintings are all about jazz, and like to them it makes sense, but I'm like, no, I like the paintings, but I don't think about that music when I look at it, so I wonder if I'm like, is this my generation's jazz? Berlin techno. So if there aren't any, or do you want me, I can wrap it up. Yeah. I've been doing enough of these where I know what you're supposed to say at the end. So thank you all for coming. Feel free to hang around, and you can ask the artist any other questions, and feel free to chat. So thank you so much. Thank you for coming.